since 2015, South Carolina has only lost the SEC twice. So let's be clear. They've been running the table on winning the SEC. So I do think there can be some discourse here as who might be able to challenge South Carolina the best for that. But I wanted to do some in real time repurposing there because I didn't want to make it seem like I think it's like wide open here. You know what I mean?
Look at what happens when Martin Sawyer just comes to his senses a little bit. You know, it just makes the show so much easier. All right. Nia, the floor is yours. Okay, let me do my job. There are a lot of good teams in the SEC. You have South Carolina, who, as Martin has run the SEC for as long as I've been a fan of women's basketball. Anyway, you've got LSU, who shut off the season pretty strong. And there's been some question about their roster as of lately, some question about the legitimacy of their standing in the country because of that non-con schedule. And then you've got Texas, who has beaten South Carolina once this season in the Players Era Championship back in Vegas. There's Oklahoma. There's Vanderbilt, who is the only other undefeated team in the country outside of UConn. And, of course, they play in the SEC. So there's a lot to unpack here. But, Nia, who do you think wins the SEC this season?
Man, so this is actually the first year where I'm just looking at a lot of these teams, just seeing, what the transfer portal looked like, coaches making different adjustments and relying and trusting other players. And I mean, this is kind of one of the first seasons in SEC where I feel like it's up in the air. I mean, we cannot forget about Vanderbilt and how right now they're 5-0. Michaela Blake's and company. She's the number 2 scorer right now in the SEC. But then, of course, South Carolina, as we mentioned, elite force. And I think what South Carolina was able to show in their previous matchup before Coppin State was just seeing how complete of a team this is, right? Where you talked about last year, it was Malaysia Fuwali, right? You had your Raven Johnson, you had your Tessa Johnson, and now you're bringing in now where we have Tanaya Lanson in the mix, right? And so that guard play is so good. But I'll tell you what else has been really good: the bench play. Every time someone comes off the bench for South Carolina, somebody is coming in and producing, and we saw that in that matchup in Texas. How it wasn't just the lead players that were keeping the team, that were keeping South Carolina ahead, but our bench players came and gave great moments too, right? You mentioned LSU. I think LSU had to have that fall from grace, right? Where they had to readjust themselves because they were coming off that non-conference matchup, non-conference schedule. And now here it is. It's SEC play. We can't forget about that game against Duke, but SEC play, right? You're starting out short. And I think Kim Mulkey and company have been able to go back, watch some film. Maybe there's been some tough conversations about decision-making, right? Let's play together. Let's play as a unit. But also, too, I'll tell you guys, Tennessee. We cannot forget about Tennessee as well being in that conversation. And though Tennessee has had some, up and down moments, especially in non-conference play, we've seen a bit of SEC action here. That's another complete team. If they can just figure out and find their rhythm as far as what works, we're seeing Mia Paldo really come in as a freshman, a true freshman. You have Janiyah Parker.
Jersey,
yes,
market.
Jersey, yes, Jersey. I actually had a chance to cover them. Well, they weren't playing, but they had a chance to sit in the booth with us at Overtime Elite, me and Maya Paldo. And I mean, they are just incredible basketball minds. The basketball IQ is very, very high. And they have a great future with women's college basketball. If they decide to go on pro, I hope they decide to coach or be in the analyst booth because they are just really high basketball IQ. But I mean, guys, SEC ball right now has been exciting. It has been so exciting. And we're seeing a lot of teams saying, okay, what can we do to match South Carolina's intensity? And of course, before I wrap up what I need to say, of course, we can't forget about Texas. We cannot forget about Texas and just that incredible team, your Madison Booker and just seeing those teams, even though they fell short last week, but just seeing how complete of a team they are as well. Because I'll tell you, the depth in the paint for Texas has really helped aside from just the guard play. So I have quite a few favorites. But of course, South Carolina is at the top of the list for sure. But let's not sleep on Vandy. Let's not sleep on Vandy because they are the only undefeated team right now in the SEC. And they are led by a very, very dominant guard. But also, too, we can't forget about the pieces that are around her as well.
Well said. Marcus, you looked at Vandy up close and personal on Monday. What did you get a chance to see from seeing them in person?
So Martin doesn't like. So one thing I've prided myself on, Nia, I like to be a pretty realistic fan, right? I'm fans of good teams that have found themselves to be very successful. Martin cracks on me all the time because I am a South Carolina fan. I'm also an Aces fan, but it's because Asia Wilson is the reason why I love women's basketball, right? So as Martin put it, I just lucked into a great time to start my women's basketball journey. I'll eat that. And sometimes I might be a little bit too down on my team. As I said, had the great opportunity to watch Vanderbilt up close on Monday. I am very nervous for Sunday. I am petrified, I will tell you. Because I think for most people who don't have the opportunity to watch Vanderbilt basketball, right? You think Vanderbilt is just Michaela Blake's. You think that it's the Michaela Blake show and that's it. And it's and sometimes when the best player on your team is as good as Michaela Blake's is, whether you are a diehard fan or whether you are someone who watches casually, you can kind of fall into that trap. Sure. Aubrey Galvin played really, really, really good basketball on Monday. Coach, after the game, talked about how it's insane. It was kind of one concern she had when she was recruiting Aubrey is the fact that she's so small. She didn't actually think that she'd be able to handle SEC play. Then she went to her first high school game and was like, oh, she'll be just fine because she has that dog in her and plays with a level of aggression and just a mentality that you just can't teach, right? And that mentality fits perfectly in with what Vanderbilt has going on right now. Then you take a look at Justine Pissot, who is a 6'3", a 6'4" guard who can shoot, which is what everyone kind of thinks about when they see her, but she's also a really good defender and has gotten better, apparently, as a defender compared to where she was at last season to where she's at now. And then you look at the way that they're coached. They're coached by, a coach who has won championships at UConn, both as a player, but also as an assistant under Coach Genos. She knows what it takes to compete for and win championships. And she's instilling that into her team. And they're 19-0. And it's not like they're playing like nobody. They've played tough competition. As you mentioned, Nia, they're undefeated in conference play. They did beat LSU. That was the game that kind of had everyone raising their eyebrows really about LSU. And I think this game on Sunday will determine who wins the SEC. I really do. And it's obviously not just because if Vanderbilt wins, for example, they're still undefeated, right? But I think for South Carolina, this is a big test for them. I would say this is a bigger test for them than the rematch against Texas was, because the Texas-South Carolina games, for the most part, have always gone one of two ways. They've either been really close games or they've been blowouts. And if they're blowouts, South Carolina's won them. So the only time that we've seen Texas beat South Carolina or have a chance really against South Carolina is when the games have been close. So you kind of know what you're getting when you're going into those matchups. But this is a game where you're going up against a Vanderbilt team that just feels different, that plays different, that looks different than what we're accustomed to seeing across the SEC. We think of SEC as physicality and front court play. Yeah. Vanderbilt brings their physicality from the backcourt and the perimeter, which is unlike anything we've seen from, the LSUs who won a national championship, the Texas team who has competed for and come close to winning a national championship as close as last season, obviously South Carolina. So I think the contrast of styles there is what's going to be very interesting. And if Vanderbilt can win on Sunday and beat South Carolina, I don't know how they would lose to any other SEC team if they beat South Carolina, just considering if you can beat the cream of the crop, this is the team that kind of set forth the blueprint for what we view SEC play to be now. You can beat them, you can beat anybody. But for the South Carolina standpoint, I think this is a big game for them because, as I've talked to Martin about, the Gamecocks need like a win that they can feel really, really good about. And I don't think they've gotten that yet. I think the Texas game was close to that because it was a bit of a get-back game for them from what happened in Vegas. But I still don't think we've seen South Carolina play a complete 4 quarters of basketball. And I think that's what it's going to take for them to beat Vanderbilt. So if South Carolina goes into that game on Sunday, plays a full 4 quarters of basketball and comes out with a win, that adds a lot of confidence to a team that, number one, already has a chip on their shoulder from how their season ended last year at the hands of UConn. Number two, has had a lot of interesting things kind of going on with them as far as Malaysia leaving, Tania coming in, missing some time a little bit, trying to figure all of that out. This girl from France, Alicia Turnabes, is here now, so now you're trying to get her into the fold, right? They have a game in 2.5 weeks against LSU. That is still a big game for them. So, this game is really, really, really important. I think whoever wins on Sunday wins the SEC. I would love to see South Carolina win this game, obviously, because I'm a fan. But after what I saw on Monday, I actually think Vanderbilt has a strong chance of winning that game. And I think Vanderbilt might be the team that wins the SEC this season.
I do think Vandy has kind of a momentum and an energy about them right now. I think part of that is like how Michaela Blake's plays. She's just so dynamic and so active on both ends of the floor. She's one of those, Nia, where and like I mentioned before, I've covered Michaela since high school because I'm in Jersey, so I'm pretty familiar. But she just, I mean, she's taken her game to like a whole nother level. She's always had just like the simple stuff, though. You watch Michaela Blake's, you don't see a lot of dribbles. You don't see her fooling around, playing around a lot. She can get creative, especially with how she finishes around the rim, super athletic. Can contort her body in different ways. Like she has really interesting athletic potential, but again, she doesn't do too much, doesn't try too much. It's all within the flow of things. She can step out of the flow and kind of just create for herself. She's got that, but you don't see a lot of chaos. You don't see a lot of confusion, right? Like Vanderbilt kind of knows who they are, knows their roles, and they have some dynamic weapons. I do think this Sunday game is going to be a real test for them, a real test for South Carolina too, because I think the way Vanderbilt is playing, them being undefeated, I do think this is that game, Marcus, where South Carolina needs to show that we are still the top dog, still the top power in the SEC, because I do still think that's the case. Now, I feel like Vanderbilt, I was looking at the score. I know that game against LSU, it was 65-61. You guys were talking about, those Texas, South Carolina matchups. And when we know how sturdy Texas is, I've wondered about Texas offensively. Marcus has heard me talk a lot about just their offense. Sometimes it can get a little stale. They run the baseline screen for Maddie Booker, for Rory Harmon. We kind of know it's coming. I don't see too much creativity and adjustments happening with offense. So sometimes it feels like they can get a little stale. And those games with South Carolina, those low scoring, games, it turns into those kind of gritty staple SEC matchups. I don't know if Vandy is ready or built yet. Maybe they are. I could be wrong. I'll see on Sunday if they're built for a gritty game, because their game against LSU got a little gritty, and I think they out tough them a little. I think they show like Vandy. They're like, hey, we can out tough you guys. Like, we're here. We can outscore you. We can defend. If they can do that against South Carolina, I think you make a good point, Marcus. Who wins this game Sunday could be a barometer for who wins the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple comments in there. Actually, let's just go to the comments real quick. So, Chicago Cheetah says only Vanderbilt won the conference and have one quality win in conference play. They got to show people before the respective thing. So I do think that's an interesting point, but I think that goes back to what I said about the beginning about like your exposure to Vanderbilt, right? Like they did beat LSU, right? And like they have to play who's in front of them, but they beat Michigan. Michigan's the 7th ranked team in the country going into that game on Monday. They were up 19 points going into the half. They almost lost that game. I get that, but like the way that they had to win that game, like Michaela Blake's had 4 fouls in the third quarter and missed the first couple minutes of the fourth because of those 4 fouls. Kind of momentum shifted a bit there. I am not going to take away from what Vanderbilt has done this season because their wins in the SEC so far have been against Arkansas and Mizzou and the SEC is tough to play in, regardless of who the team is, just off the strength of the physicality. And again, they're bringing that physicality from a direction that we're not used to seeing. Like when we go into SEC games, except for like when LSU plays, because LSU just has a really good guard group, right? Of Michaela Williams and Flau'jae Johnson and Mylasia Wiley. I think we're always looking for what's happening in the front court. That typically dictates what happens in these SEC games. They don't have like a front court that with names that pop out at you. Like that's why I'm saying they're just they're almost like a case study in a way of like, how is a team that is led by guards in the SEC having been this successful? Right now, I could be wrong. They could play South Carolina and they could be reminded that there are levels to this, right? And they could lose. But based on what I've seen and based on what I know about their coach, based on what I know about their players, based on what I watch with my own 2 eyes, I am not going to just dismiss Vanderbilt because they don't have like a quality win in the SEC. And if we're saying quality is being determined by the teams that they've beaten, because LSU is a team that we think can potentially win the SEC. They beat
Correct.
LSU. So that should mean something, right?
Yeah.
They have a chance to beat South Carolina on Sunday. They play Texas in a month or so. So, like, it's not like the opportunity for them to get these quality wins isn't there. Those games just haven't showed up on the schedule yet. To your point, Martin, I do think that aside from just the SEC component of it, I think this is also going to be a great barometer for Vanderbilt as far as how far they can go in the tournament in general. Like, yes, they are the number 5th ranked team in the country right now. I think they probably went up a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't remember what the rankings were yesterday, but like they are a top 5 team in the country. They beat South Carolina. They've already beaten LSU. Now you're going into and thinking about, okay, well, what can they do against Texas? And the conversations about Vanderbilt, if they can beat all 3 of those teams, or even if they can beat a combination of 2 of those 3 teams, that still means a lot for a Vanderbilt team that, again, isn't nationally recognized as a team that can legitimately compete for or win a national championship this season, despite the fact that, again, there's only one other team undefeated right now in the country, and it's the team that we saw win the national championship last season. Like, this is more than just luck. This is more than just a fluke. Like, there is something brewing in Vanderbilt, and we would be foolish to not give it the respect that it deserves, I think.
Nia, what say you about LSU? I still think they're the wild. I think they're just the wild card. I can't.
Wild card for sure.
Just straight up wild card. You can't dismiss them. You can't look over them. They may be flawed. They may be small. They may I'm just like, you catch them on the right day or the wrong day. They will take it to you. What do you see when you look at LSU?
Yeah, I mean, of course, going back to that Vandy loss, right? Of course, Flajay Johnson only had 0 points, and then she comes back against UGA and she's the lead scorer, right? And so wild card is the perfect example where, again, I think that LSU is still transitioning of finding their rhythm, right? They had an elite non-conference play, but now things have switched, gears have switched. And so it's about honestly creating shots, great shot selections, right? And good fundamentally sound defense, right? And I think we saw that, of course, against that matchup in Texas, right? Where it was like, okay, they're getting it. They're getting it.
Right.
But then when we talk about that wild card aspect of, okay, so what happens when the guard play is not on? What happens, right? Because that depth, I mean, you have Grace Knox. You have all of these players within the front court that can come in and give great minutes, but it's not efficient sometimes. And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing is, when the guards are not on, who else is going to step up? What does that look like? Because, pretty much their success has came after their guard play, right? Yeah. With Fuwali being in the mix now, Michaela being in the mix, Flajay Johnson, just all these incredible elite guards coming in for LSU. But then when we think about depth and post, that's not the first team that I'm looking at of like, they have this elite, post player down low that could really, really shut things down, whether if it's defensively or offensively, especially when the guards are off. So I would say wild card, still an incredible team, despite the flack that they get sometimes. They are young women. We have to remember that. And they are playing in one of the hardest, and I mean hardest conferences in the world, I would say. And so just even going back to that conversation of Vandy, where it's like, okay, well, they're 19-0, great, but they haven't really played anybody of substance. And it's just thinking about, we're talking about Vanderbilt. I mean, Vanderbilt is in the conversation. Yeah. I mean, Vanderbilt has not been in the conversation in over 17 years, 2009, if I'm not mistaken. So to see this new era, and that's why I say SEC play, it could be anybody's, because I think that each team can be a bit of a wild card too, but also each team does something differently than the other team that may get them over the hump and the advantage in SEC play.